John Pollock was born in Bristol in the year 1920 and was raised as a heavily devoted Christian before growing up to convert to becoming Catholic, a religion he would pass on to his wife Florence upon marriage. At the extremely young age of just 9, John read about reincarnation in a novel and started to truly believe it, despite it being against the Catholic religion to believe in such a thing. But he would constantly pray to God for evidence to prove himself right and all of the priests wrong. His wife Florence and John were a relatively normal couple leading a relatively normal life in the small town of Hexham, England. And in 1951 they were joyed to welcome their second daughter Jacqueline to the world. Most of John and Florence's spare time went into a family business, so for the most part their children were raised by Florence's mother, but the sisters were inseparable. The eldest, Joanna, would protect Jacqueline as much as she could. She loved wearing costumes and acting in plays that she had created, she was great at sharing with other children, and the two siblings enjoyed combing each other's hair. But strangely, Joanna allegedly had a premonition that she would never grow up, actually claiming, "I will never be a lady." At the age of just 3, Jacqueline accidentally fell off a tricycle and caused a small gash on her forehead over her right eye near the root of her nose, causing a permanent scar. It was especially visible during cold weather, and she also had a round, dark birthmark on the left side of her waist. Despite this, it seems like the perfect family life, but on May the 5th, 1957, that all changed. Forever. As John, Florence, 11-year-old Joanna, 6-year-old Jacqueline and one of the children's friends, Anthony, were on their way to visit their local church. They were all on foot when they were tragically hit by a car. Their 2 children and their friend were all killed instantly. The driver was 54-year-old Marjorie Wynne, who was actually attempting suicide after her children were taken away from her. She had just taken an obscene amount of aspirin and phenobarbital and was seen driving erratically before crashing into the children, who were unable to get out of the way in time as they were trapped by a wall, tossing them into the air like cricket balls upon impact. The parents were devastated, but John prayed for them to come back, believing in his heart that reincarnation was real, but Florence didn't believe so. She tried her best to not think about them, as it only made her depression worse. John kept them in his thoughts and even claimed he sensed the presence of their spirits in one of the top rooms of their house. He would often spend time in this room to be close with them. He even believed their death was a punishment from God for him having prayed for proof of reincarnation, but he maintained that he believed his prayer will be answered and they will be born again. This caused a huge dispute with his wife, who was against this notion, and it almost destroyed their entire marriage. John longed for his daughters to return, and just 1 year later, Florence discovered that she was once again pregnant. Her husband insisted that she was going to give birth to the reincarnated daughters, and despite palpation and heartbeats backed up by doctors revealing that they were only expecting 1 child, he continued persisting that they were going to have twins, which Florence and the doctors all refused to believe. There was also no history of twins in either parent's family tree, but John was still positive of this. Weirdly, on October the 4th, 1958, just as John had predicted, Florence gave birth to identical twin girls named Gillian and Jennifer, but even more bizarrely, Jennifer had a birthmark that looked exactly like Jacqueline's permanent scar on the root of her nose, and a second birthmark in the exact same place as Jacqueline's one. When the girls were only 3 months old, they decided to move to Whitley Bay in the northeast coast of England and never spoke of their previously deceased siblings to either of the girls in order to protect them. It would only get stranger as they turned 2 years old. The parents had gotten out some old toys that were owned by Jacqueline and Joanna, and despite Jennifer and Gillian having never seen these before, they were immediately familiar with them, even correctly naming dolls that their previous sisters had given the toys, even correctly deciding whose toy belonged to whom. They even claimed they were given to them by Santa Claus, which was also the case for the first pair of sisters. As the girls reached the age of 4, the family moved back to Hexham, and as they drove through the town for the first time, the girls would point out landmarks that they had no memory of whatsoever. They seemed to know the entire layout of the town, asking to go across the road to the park and swings that they had never been to before. They drove past their previous sister's school and insisted that it was their school and they used to go there. Florence also noticed the girls playing very disturbing games, one of which had Jennifer laying on the floor with her head on her sister Gillian. Gillian would tell her in a very calm tone, "There's blood coming from your eyes. That's where the car hit you." John claimed that when they had to identify the bodies, Jacqueline's head was actually bandaged above the eyes. Just a month or two after this game was discovered, both girls entered a hysterical state when they merely walked past a parked car which had an engine ticking over. They began to scream at the top of their lungs, "The car, it's coming to get us." It would only get stranger when Gillian once pointed to Jennifer's forehead birthmark and actually claimed that's the mark Jennifer got when she fell off her tricycle. They would not only somehow know of and discuss the accident, but they would always speak in present tense and in first person. Often the girls would complain about the lunch they were given at home, and when Florence suggested they get lunch at school instead, they answered, "Yeah, we've done that before." They hadn't, but Joanna and Jacqueline had. The previous sister, Jacqueline, struggled to learn to write, her teacher being concerned that she still held the pencil upright in her fist, asking the parents to correct this by slapping her hand. When the twins started to learn to write, Gillian immediately held the pencil properly, but Jennifer held it in a fist, even as a young adult. Florence also used to wear a smock when helping John with his milk delivery business, but decided to stop working a short while after the death of their children. But around the time the twins turned 4.5, John put this smock on to do some painting, and Jennifer asked him, despite having no previous knowledge of this, "Why are you wearing Mummy's coat?" She also got annoyed that her twin sister didn't recognise it, but in a strange coincidence, the previous older sister had been at school and had not seen the coat. But when John asked her how she knew it was her mother's, she claimed she used to wear it when delivering milk. In 1963, Ian Stevenson investigated the case upon reading about it in the newspaper. He visited the family at their home and even interviewed the parents at great length, checking the girls for birthmarks. He met with them again in 1967, continued to talk with them over the years before visiting once more in 1978 when they had turned 20, when he conducted a zygosity test which basically determined whether or not they were identical or unidentical twins. They were proven to be identical, which makes the fact that one twin has a birthmark and the other doesn't even more confusing. John was so convinced by this, he refused to even leave flowers or honour his previous daughter's graves, finding it pointless since he was so sure that they were merely born again.
There's a grave there, but it means nothing. To me, to bring flowers or anything on the grave would be sheer hypocrisy, because I don't believe that they're here. I mean, it's just a symbol of two girls that lived that were reborn.
Although some of their physical attributes are arguably unexplained, Stevenson did conclude that the twins gained a near-identical personality to their previous sisters, but it easily could have been their parents manipulating their behaviours to perfectly match their deceased siblings. He did, however, maintain that he believes this is true reincarnation and the most convincing case of such, even writing an entire book about it. But strangely, as the twins turned 5 years old, the similarities completely stopped. They miraculously forgot all past memories, and the parents maintained to their graves that they had never mentioned their past sisters or John's belief in reincarnation to either of them, though they did discover the latter on their own when they turned 13. They grew up to live normal lives, and when Ian Stevenson met with them again in their 20s, they claimed to have absolutely no memory of any of this. They decided to accept their parents' belief of their reincarnation, but themselves remained skeptical. However, in 1981, Gillian experienced some weird inner vision where she was playing in a sand pit with her non-existent brothers. She described in great detail the house, garden, lawns and orchards of a home the family had lived in previously when Joanna was younger than 4. Gillian had never even been to Wickham. Florence Pollock passed away in 1979, but Stevenson continued to talk with John and his daughter until Mr. Pollock followed his wife, dying in 1985. However, many remain sceptical, such as British historian Ian Wilson, who ridicules the entire case, since the only witnesses with statements are the parents, one of which wholeheartedly believed in reincarnation and the other was unsure. He also believed that since the first set of sisters were from the same family, the twins could have discovered them through other means. He concluded that during Florence's entire second pregnancy, she must have replayed the death of her earlier daughters countless times in her mind, but the story holds no weight as other cases are from different families in different locations with no knowledge of previous circumstances. Richard Rockley, writing for the website Skeptic Report, claimed that John Pollock believed in reincarnation so much that he could have manipulated his wife to go along with his lies, or they simply could have just been reading too much into the twins' statements and imaginations. The birthmarks, which are constantly argued, still didn't deter his skepticism, however, as many reincarnation cases have similar tales of this. So were these girls really reincarnations of their previous sisters maintaining all of their memories? Or was this whole thing a giant hoax manipulated by their parents? Despite it being seen as the most compelling case, lacking so much evidence, the case of the Pollock twins continues to baffle, and we are still seeking answers.